You ever walk past someone say, "Hi, how are you?" And before they even answer, you're already gone. We do it every day. Not because we don't care, but because we've trained ourselves to sound polite instead of being present. 4 words, "Hey, how are you?" have become the easiest way to avoid real connection. But what if, instead of repeating what everyone says, you asked something that actually mattered? What if you spoke in a way that made people feel seen, not just spoken to? Because connection doesn't start with hi. It starts with meaning. Stop communicating out of habit. Start speaking with intention. Most people don't even realize how much of their daily communication runs on autopilot. We say what's familiar, what's easy, what feels safe. We repeat phrases like, "Hey, how are you?" or "What's up?" without ever stopping to ask ourselves if we actually care about the answer. It's a script we've been handed since childhood, and we follow it because it's comfortable. But the problem with comfort is that it keeps you disconnected. Habitual communication lacks presence. It lacks awareness. It lacks the very thing that makes a message powerful: intent. When you speak out of habit, you're not really communicating. You're just filling the air with sound. Speaking with intention, though, changes everything. It forces you to slow down. It requires you to think about what you want to say and why you're saying it. It means your words carry weight because they come from a conscious choice, not an unconscious routine. When you start speaking with intention, you stop hiding behind phrases that sound polite but mean nothing. You begin choosing words that have purpose, direction, and emotion. You start to notice how your tone, your timing, even your silence can impact someone else. You become deliberate instead of default. Think about the last time you had a conversation that actually stuck with you. It probably wasn't because someone said something fancy or perfectly rehearsed. It was because they meant it. You could feel their sincerity. That's the power of intentional communication. It transfers energy. When you speak with purpose, your presence is felt even after the words fade. People remember how you made them feel, not just what you said. Habitual communication can't do that because it's emotionally hollow. You can't connect deeply with someone while you're on autopilot. You can only connect when you're aware of what you're giving and what you're receiving. Intentional communication is not about being dramatic or overly serious. It's about being real. It's about saying things that come from truth, not convenience. Instead of saying, "Hi, how are you?" and moving on, maybe you pause and say, "Hey, I've been thinking about you. How's your week been, really?" Instead of ending a text with, "Oh, cool," maybe you take 5 extra seconds to express appreciation or clarity. Those tiny changes shift the entire energy of your communication. They tell the other person that you're actually present, that they matter enough for you to engage beyond the surface. Speaking with intention also makes you more responsible for your words. You realize that every sentence you speak has an effect. It can encourage, discourage, build, break, connect, or divide. And when you're aware of that, you start treating your words differently. You stop speaking just to fill silence. You stop throwing words around like they're disposable. You start using them to add value to conversations, to people, to moments. That's where respect begins. When you understand that words are not just sound, they're impact. The reason so many conversations feel meaningless is because people are trying to connect using recycled language. We're so used to default greetings and small talk that it's become a social shield. It keeps us from having to reveal anything about ourselves, and it keeps others from getting too close. But communication is supposed to be connection. It's supposed to be the bridge between your mind and someone else's. When you rely on habit, you're not building bridges, you're building walls. You're keeping interaction safe, predictable, unchallenging. And in doing so, you're missing the very thing you're craving: authentic human connection. Speaking with intention requires vulnerability. It means showing up as a person, not a performance. It means risking awkwardness, honesty, and depth. It's easier to say, "How are you?" than it is to say, "You seem off today. Is everything okay?" But one builds distance, and the other builds trust. One keeps the conversation polite, the other makes it meaningful. When you decide to speak with intention, you're choosing connection over comfort. You're choosing to be awake in your communication instead of asleep in your patterns. This shift also changes the way people see you. When you speak intentionally, people start to notice. They feel the difference. You become someone who listens deeply, who engages thoughtfully, who communicates with clarity. Your presence starts to command attention, not because you're louder, but because you're real. In a world full of noise, authenticity stands out. People are drawn to it. They trust it. They crave it because it's rare. Intentional speech makes you that rare person who actually hears and means what they say. The truth is, the way you communicate reflects how you live. If you rush through conversations, you're probably rushing through life. If you don't pay attention to what you're saying, you're probably not paying attention to what you're feeling. Communication is just a mirror. It shows you how present or absent you are. That's why speaking with intention doesn't just change how others experience you, it changes how you experience yourself. You start noticing your patterns, your impulses, your reactions. You begin catching yourself before saying things you don't mean. You become more thoughtful, more grounded, more aligned with who you actually want to be. Speaking with intention also improves relationships. It builds stronger connections because people trust words that come from presence. They can sense when you're fully there versus when you're half listening. When your words match your energy, people relax around you. They feel safe opening up. They feel seen. That's what authentic communication does. It creates space for honesty. It replaces shallow exchanges with meaningful ones. It turns conversations into moments that matter. But here's the challenge. Intentional communication takes practice. It doesn't happen automatically. You have to train yourself to pause before you speak, to listen before you respond, to think before you react. It means asking yourself, what do I really want to say right now? Or what does this person actually need to hear? It's not about overanalyzing. It's about being aware. Awareness is what turns ordinary conversation into connection. Awareness is what transforms speech from noise into meaning. You might notice that when you start communicating intentionally, not everyone will respond the same way. Some people won't know how to handle depth because they're used to surface talk. They might think you're being too serious, too intense, too real. That's okay. Don't let that discourage you. Your goal isn't to fit into their comfort zone. Your goal is to bring authenticity to your interactions. And authenticity will always feel uncomfortable to those who hide behind habit. But it will also attract those who are tired of empty words. It will draw in the people who are ready to have real conversations, to connect beyond small talk, to grow with you. When you stop communicating out of habit, your world expands. You start noticing things you used to overlook, the tone in someone's voice, the pause before their answer, the unspoken emotions hiding beneath polite replies. You become more empathetic, more patient, more connected to the human experience. And that's what intentional communication really is. It's not just about what you say, but how deeply you're willing to see and hear others. Every time you open your mouth, you have a choice to repeat or to reveal, to connect or to conform, to speak or to mean. Most people choose the easy path. They repeat. They conform. They survive communication instead of using it to thrive. But if you want real relationships, real opportunities, real understanding, you can't afford to stay on autopilot. You have to wake up in your words. You have to speak with intention, with presence, with truth, because that's where connection begins and that's where it grows. Replace small talk with real talk that builds genuine connection. The truth is, most of what we call conversation today is nothing more than noise dressed up as communication. It's surface level chatter that fills time but leaves us empty. We talk about the weather, the latest show, or what we had for lunch, not because it matters, but because it's safe. Safe is predictable. Safe means we don't have to open up. We don't have to care too much. We don't have to be vulnerable. But that safety comes with a cost. It disconnects us from the people around us. It keeps relationships shallow, predictable, and replaceable. Real talk, on the other hand, is what builds the kind of connections that last. It's uncomfortable, it's raw, it's honest. And that's exactly why it's powerful. When you engage in real talk, you're doing more than just exchanging words. You're sharing truth. You're allowing someone to see the world through your perspective, and you're giving yourself permission to see theirs. You stop trying to impress, and you start trying to understand. That's where authenticity lies. Most people don't realize how much energy they waste pretending. Pretending to be okay. Pretending to agree. Pretending to care about things that don't matter. Real talk cuts through all of that. It strips away the performance and reveals the person. Think about the conversations that changed your life. They probably weren't the ones that started with small talk. They were the ones where someone said something that made you stop, think, or feel deeply. Maybe it was a friend who called you out when you needed it. Maybe it was a mentor who told you a hard truth. Maybe it was a stranger who shared something that made you rethink your whole perspective. Those moments stay with you because they were real. They weren't polite. They were honest. They weren't rehearsed. They were human. The reason small talk dominates our culture is because we're scared of discomfort. Real talk requires emotional honesty, and honesty feels risky. What if the other person doesn't agree? What if they judge us? What if they walk away? But here's the thing. If someone leaves because you spoke from the heart, they were never truly with you in the first place. Connection built on small talk is like a house built on sand. It looks fine until life shakes it. Real connection, the kind that lasts through challenges, disagreements, and silence, can only be built on truth. Replacing small talk with real talk doesn't mean you have to be serious all the time. It doesn't mean every conversation has to be deep or intense. It means you bring sincerity to everything you say. Even humor can be real when it's honest. Even light moments can have depth when they come from a place of genuine feeling. It's not about changing what you talk about. It's about changing how you talk. When you stop speaking to fill silence and start speaking to connect, the quality of your relationship shifts instantly. Start by being curious. Instead of asking questions you already know the answers to, ask questions that reveal something new. What's been on your mind lately? What's something you're excited about right now? What's been challenging you? Simple questions like these create space for authenticity. They show that you're not just interested in conversation, you're interested in them. And when people feel that, they open up. Real talk isn't forced, it's invited. It's what happens naturally when someone feels safe enough to be honest. Real talk also demands that you listen differently. You can't have a genuine conversation if you're just waiting for your turn to speak. Listening with presence means you're not trying to fix, judge, or respond. You're trying to understand. You're listening for meaning, not just words. When someone shares something real, they're not looking for solutions, they're looking for connection. They want to feel heard. They want to know their voice matters. When you give that to someone, when you truly hear them, you build a bridge that small talk could never create. Replacing small talk with real talk also transforms your self-awareness. You start noticing how often you hide behind filler words and empty exchanges. You begin recognizing when your conversations are autopilot versus authentic. You realize that what you say and how you say it reflects how you live. People who constantly engage in shallow conversation are often the same ones avoiding depth in their own lives. They keep their words light because they're afraid of what might surface if they dig deeper. But the truth is, depth is where connection, growth, and healing happen. The more you practice real talk, the more you attract people who value it. When you communicate with honesty and presence, you naturally draw in those who are tired of pretending. You start finding friendships and relationships that are built on understanding rather than convenience. You begin to recognize the difference between people who just want your time and people who want your truth. And that realization changes everything. Real talk also teaches you how to handle silence. Small talk fears silence because it feels awkward. Real talk understands silence because it knows connection doesn't always need words. Sometimes the most meaningful moments happen when you're just sitting in shared understanding, no words necessary. That's how you know the connection is real, when silence feels comfortable, not empty. This shift from small talk to real talk also has an impact on how people perceive you. When you speak authentically, you become memorable. People remember those who make them feel something, not those who simply filled the air. You become known as someone who doesn't waste words, someone who means what they say. That kind of energy commands respect. It earns trust, and it separates you from the crowd of polite noise that dominates everyday conversation. To build genuine connection, you have to be willing to go first. You have to be the one who steps beyond the surface. Ask the deeper question. Share a real feeling. Give an honest compliment. Be transparent about what's actually going on in your life. When you do that, you give others permission to do the same. People match the energy you bring into the room. If you show up authentically, most of them will too. Replacing small talk with real talk doesn't mean you'll connect with everyone, and that's okay. The goal isn't to connect with everyone, it's to connect deeply with someone. Quality over quantity, depth over frequency. It's better to have 3 real conversations in a month than 30 surface level ones that mean nothing. The ones that matter will feed your soul, challenge your thinking, and remind you that genuine connection still exists in a world full of empty words. When you stop relying on small talk, you rediscover the beauty of honesty. You realize that people aren't looking for perfect responses, they're looking for real ones. You see that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the foundation of trust. And you learn that true communication isn't about talking more, it's about talking better. It's about creating moments that matter, words that carry meaning, and conversations that remind both people they're alive, understood, and connected. Listen to understand, not just to reply. Most people don't actually listen, they wait. They wait for their turn to speak, to defend, to prove, to respond. You can see it in their eyes when you talk to them. They're not with you. They're in their head, already crafting what they'll say next. That's not listening. That's reacting. And that's why so many conversations go in circles, why so many relationships stay stuck, why so many people walk away from interactions feeling unheard. Because listening to reply is about you. Listening to understand is about them. And the moment you make that shift, everything changes. When you listen to understand, you're not just hearing words, you're hearing meaning. You're listening for tone, emotion, silence, the spaces between what's said and what's not. You're not rushing to fix or argue. You're simply holding space for someone to be real. It's a rare thing because true listening takes humility. It takes the willingness to set your ego aside, to stop thinking about your point, your story, your opinion, and just be present. But that's exactly what makes it powerful. People crave to be understood more than they crave to be agreed with. You don't have to fix someone's pain to help them. Sometimes the most healing thing you can do is simply listen long enough for them to feel seen. When someone feels truly heard, their defenses drop. The conversation softens. The energy changes. You create a space where honesty can breathe. That's how connection grows. Think about the last time you tried to open up to someone and they immediately interrupted you with advice or judgment. You shut down, didn't you? Because you didn't want their answer. You wanted their understanding. You wanted them to listen without trying to control the direction. That's the difference between reaction and reception. Listening to understand is an act of patience. It's about curiosity, not control. We live in a culture that glorifies speaking, debating, expressing, posting, but undervalues listening. Everyone wants a platform, but few want to offer presence. We've confused noise with communication. But the loudest person in the room isn't the most powerful one. The listener is. The person who listens deeply gathers perspective. They learn more. They see patterns others miss. They notice the truth behind the tone. Listening is not passive. It's one of the most active forms of empathy you can give. Listening to understand requires you to remove your filters. Because we don't just listen with our ears, we listen with our past, our emotions, our assumptions. Most people filter what they hear through their own experiences. If someone tells you something painful, you compare it to your pain. If someone shares success, you relate it to your own achievements. That's natural. But it's not understanding. Understanding happens when you step out of your own story long enough to enter theirs. It's when you're willing to see from their perspective, even if it challenges yours. When you practice listening to understand, conversations start to feel different. You notice you're not as quick to get defensive. You don't feel the same urge to prove yourself. You realize you're calmer because you're no longer trying to win the conversation. You're trying to connect. You're not waiting to speak. You're learning to stay. That patience alone changes the way people see you. Because being a good listener doesn't make you weak. It makes you trustworthy. People open up to those who make them feel safe, and safety is built through presence, not performance. There's also a subtle shift that happens inside you when you listen this way. You start to value silence. You stop seeing it as awkward. You understand that silence gives people room to think, to process, to find their words. Sometimes the best thing you can say is nothing. Just nod. Just hold eye contact. Just let them know they have the floor. You'll be surprised how often people will fill that silence with truth they wouldn't have said otherwise, because silence signals that you're not rushing them. It tells them their words matter enough for you to wait. Listening to understand also means listening without labeling. Most of us hear something and immediately categorize it as right or wrong, good or bad, smart or foolish. But labeling shuts down empathy. It forces you into judgment before you've even tried to see the full picture. Understanding, on the other hand, is about curiosity. It's about asking questions like, why do they feel that way? Or what made them think that? You might not agree with their perspective, but you'll always learn something from it. And sometimes that learning softens your own edges. It helps you grow. In relationships, personal or professional, this skill is transformative. When people feel understood, they stop arguing and start sharing. They stop defending and start trusting. Imagine what that does in a friendship, in a marriage, in a team. When someone knows you'll listen without attacking, they bring you their honesty. They bring you their truth. And that truth becomes the foundation of connection. That's how problems actually get solved. Not through louder talking, but through deeper listening. But listening to understand isn't just about others, it's also about yourself. How often do you actually listen to you? How often do you sit in silence and try to understand what you're feeling instead of judging it or distracting yourself from it. The way you listen to others is often a reflection of how you listen to yourself. If you constantly interrupt your own emotions, if you rush past your own discomfort, you'll do the same in conversations. Learning to listen to others begins with learning to sit with your own thoughts without rushing to fix them. This kind of listening takes discipline because it requires patience in a world that values speed. We're conditioned to fill every pause, to react instantly, to always have something to say. But real understanding happens in the pause. It happens in the moment between hearing and responding. That's where empathy lies. It's in that space that you realize listening is not just an act of communication. It's an act of respect. When you give someone your undivided attention, you're saying, "You matter enough for me to stop everything else and be here with you." That message is more powerful than any advice you could give. When you listen to understand, people start to feel comfortable being themselves around you. They stop editing their truth because they know you won't twist it or rush it. You become a mirror that reflects them accurately, not one that distorts their words. That's a rare gift, and it makes your presence valuable. You won't have to chase people's attention when you learn to give yours. People remember how you make them feel, and being genuinely heard is one of the most unforgettable feelings there is. You'll also notice that when you listen this way, your responses become wiser, because understanding gives your words precision. Instead of reacting emotionally, you respond thoughtfully. Instead of adding noise, you add clarity. You realize you don't need to speak as much, because when you finally do, your words carry weight. Listening doesn't take away your voice, it strengthens it. It teaches you that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say begins with silence. The shift from listening to reply to listening to understand isn't just a communication skill. It's a mindset. It's a commitment to empathy over ego, presence over pride. It's choosing connection over correctness. It's reminding yourself that every person you meet has a story you don't know, and the only way to learn it is to truly listen. When you do, you stop trying to win conversations and start creating relationships. You stop needing to be right and start wanting to be kind. And that's when communication stops being a transaction and starts becoming transformation. Every conversation is a chance to make someone feel seen. That might sound simple, but it's one of the most powerful truths about human connection. Because at the end of the day, people don't remember every word you say. They remember how you made them feel. They remember if you made them feel valued, respected, understood, or ignored, dismissed, invisible. Every interaction, no matter how small, is an opportunity to leave someone a little lighter than you found them. Most people go through their day starving for acknowledgement. They walk into rooms where nobody looks up, speak into spaces where nobody really listens, and share parts of themselves that go unnoticed. That kind of invisibility hurts more than rejection. It's not that people want attention. They want recognition. They want to know they matter. When you make someone feel seen, you're not just giving them validation. You're giving them humanity. You're saying, "I notice you. I value your presence. You're not just background noise in my world." That's rare. Because in a fast-paced, self-focused world, people are so caught up in their own chaos that they forget to look up. They forget to look around. But the ones who do, the ones who take the time to truly see others, are the ones who create real impact. You don't need a stage, a microphone, or a crowd to make a difference. Sometimes, the biggest difference you'll ever make will happen in a quiet moment where you made someone feel like they mattered. Making someone feel seen isn't about grand gestures. It's about small acts of presence. It's about putting your phone down when someone's talking to you. It's remembering a person's name. It's noticing when their tone changes When their energy dips, when their smile looks a little forced, it's saying, "Hey, are you okay?" Even when it feels awkward. Those small acts tell people, "I care enough to notice." And that's something most people rarely hear. Everyone wants to be understood, but before they can be understood, they need to be seen. They need to feel safe enough to show who they really are. Every conversation you have is an opportunity to create that safety. The way you listen, the way you respond, the way you look at someone while they're speaking, it all sends a message. You can either make someone feel like they're just another face in the crowd, or you can make them feel like they're the only one in the room. That doesn't require extra effort. It requires intention. It's choosing to show up fully instead of halfway. Most of the time, you won't even realize how much it means to someone. You'll just say something kind, and they'll carry it for weeks. You'll listen for 5 minutes, and it'll stay with them for years. Because people don't forget being seen. It's easy to underestimate how deeply your presence can affect others. You might think you're just having a normal conversation, but to the other person, it might be the only moment all day where they felt acknowledged. It might be the thing that gives them hope, that reminds them they matter, that keeps them going. That's the power of being intentional with your interactions. You never know what someone's carrying, but you always have the chance to lighten their load, even just a little, by noticing them. Making someone feel seen also changes you. It pulls you out of self-focus. It teaches you empathy. When you start noticing others, you start realizing how much beauty, pain, and strength exists in the people around you. You begin to see that everyone's fighting a silent battle you can't always see. That awareness makes you softer. It makes you slower to judge and quicker to understand. You stop assuming and start asking. You stop dismissing and start caring. And that shift ripples through every relationship in your life. It's easy to think that deep connection requires deep conversation, but often it starts with something as small as presence. You don't have to solve someone's problems to make them feel seen. You just have to stop treating them like one. Look them in the eye. Listen without checking the time. Remember something they said last week and bring it up. Say, "I noticed you've been quieter lately." Say, "I appreciate how hard you've been working." Say, "You make a difference." These are simple words, but they carry weight because they tell someone, "I see you." And the truth is, being seen is rare because it's risky. To truly see someone, you have to be willing to care. And to care means you might get hurt. It means you might have to face uncomfortable emotions, awkward silence, or someone else's pain. That's why most people stay surface level. It's easier. But easier doesn't change lives. The people who choose to see others deeply, even when it's uncomfortable, are the ones who bring light into dark places. They remind people that they're not invisible, that they're not alone. Every time you interact with someone, ask yourself, am I making this person feel seen, or am I just getting through the conversation? Am I showing up to connect, or just to communicate? The answer to those questions defines the quality of your relationships, because it's not about how much you talk. It's about how much you see. It's not about being impressive. It's about being present. That presence is what people remember long after the words fade. When you start treating conversations as opportunities to make people feel seen, everything shifts. Your tone softens. Your patience grows. You stop needing to dominate every interaction, and you start wanting to understand it. You realize that connection isn't built through talking more. It's built through caring more. Every word, every glance, every gesture becomes a bridge. And even if you never see that person again, the moment you made them feel visible will stay with them. Because everyone you meet is carrying the same quiet hope. I just want someone to notice me. And that's your power. You can be that person. the one who notices, the one who listens, the one who looks up. You don't have to fix, impress, or persuade. You just have to see. Because when you make someone feel seen, you give them a moment of peace in a noisy world. You give them permission to be real. You remind them that they matter. And that's something no small talk can ever do.